Welcome everyone to today's panel on the vertical wave. And I called it that because this new format that's sort of hitting our shores from the Pacific feels like a tsunami of a lot of work in a new format that I don't understand. I think a lot of people still don't understand it. It's really heavy in Los Angeles and Vancouver right now, also in Atlanta and Toronto. So it may be coming to a city near you. So I wanted to get on top of it and sort of hear from the experts because now the people who have been working the front lines on these shows, especially script supervisors, and we have a guest panelist who's an intimacy coordinator. Incredible. These are going to be incredible perspectives to hear from new-ish people to the industry. So first, I'll introduce myself. I have no idea what vertical features are. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the working conditions and maybe the future of this medium and see how we can sort of get in front of it and what, the best advice of the people who are living through it is. I have been a script supervisor for 33 years. I felt like I had seen it all, but there's this panel, and coming up, I'll be doing a panel on the virtual wall, and there's so many new things coming at us that my students are experiencing because I train script supervisors internationally. We have students in 28 countries, so I get to hear about these things so early in the process, and it's my pleasure to bring you today's three guests. Now, I know in the promo, we also had Carissa McQueen, but she's on a vertical feature today. Her show got rescheduled and she's actually working today and she could not find a replacement. This is what is happening in Los Angeles on the non-union scene. Let's go around and introduce ourselves as what we do, where we are, and also our experience specifically in this medium.
Hi everyone, my name is ZOZO CHEN-WERNIK. I live in Vancouver, Washington, but I work based out of Los Angeles, California. I've been working as a script supervisor for more or less 3 years, and I've been working in the vertical format, basically all of this year. And I'm very excited to kind of share my perspective and experiences about working in like the slightly different format and what kind of differences there are and the challenges that come with it.
How many have you roughly worked on?
I'd say probably okay, so I just wrapped this 21 day, which is quite long for something that's like a vertical. So I'd consider that, like 4 whole weeks. And then before that, I've worked on about 6 or 7 week long vertical productions. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. And you also worked in indie film before, but not yet in union film.
Yes, correct. I am non-union. I mostly work on like low budget, medium budget, narrative, non-union stuff, and also a couple of commercials as well.
Great, great. And over to Sarah Navratil in Atlanta.
Hi, everyone. My name's Sarah. I've been a script supervisor probably about the same, about 3 years or so, but come from an acting background. So I did that for like 10, 11 years before, still do to a certain extent, but am mostly working just as a day-to-day as a script supervisor, which I'm loving, and slowly working into directing. I've probably most of my work has also been like indie, low to medium budget kind of stuff, things for like Tubi, Peacock, BET. And then I started working on verticals this year as well when all the other work went away. So probably the last like 5 or 6 months, I'd say. We've been doing usually a 10 day, 9 to 10 days for each one. And we've been doing two of those every 4 to 5 weeks. So very little turnaround time. So I'm probably at like maybe like seven-ish, right around there at this point.
And welcome, Allison Bibikoff. I'm so grateful that you are here. Not only is Allison filling in for Carissa, but she's actually got way more experience in verticals than the entire panel put together. But as an intimacy coordinator, go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. I have a background as an actor and dancer, moved into choreography and directing for theater, and became an intimacy coordinator in 2019. Same sort of backgrounds as the other panelists. I load indie, low budget to medium budget indie projects. Did 2B and actually some nice projects, but still all pretty medium budget. And I started doing verticals. I'm in Los Angeles, by the way. I just woke up. That's why I keep clearing my throat. I think I did my first vertical in around June or July of 2023. So pretty early on. And to be fair, the reason I've done so many is because as an intimacy coordinator, I'm not on the entire shoot.
Okay.
Right. So the shoots are generally 7 to 10 days. And yeah, I've done, I start counting about every 10. So I've done just over 50 somewhere. Yeah. I just did one though at 6 days, which was a lot for a vertical. That's a huge amount for a vertical for an intimacy coordinator.
Oh, of intimacy coordinating. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was a spicier one.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, it's so funny because when I was posting about this, multiple people posted under the thing. I don't want to sound like a dunce, but like, what is this? What is a vertical? And I said, I actually cannot. I've heard, first of all, I want to go through and ask each of you your definitions of what it is. I'll give you my general understanding of what it is. I mean, first of all, I've heard it called different things, vertical features, vertical series. Is there a difference? I heard it called something else, and I can't remember what the third thing was.
A mobisode.
Oh no, that's a new one. I haven't heard that one either.
Oh.
What do you guys call it? And how do you define it? Here's my best guess. Okay, this is just a guess that you guys get scripts of probably a feature length, but each divided into episodes of short reels, and they're filmed in a vertical format, and they're serialized. So it's like soap opera style of storytelling. That's my best guess. Let's go to Sarah first. Tell me your definition.
I think you probably hit it on the nail on the head, the nail on the head. I was going to say feels to me like it is a feature length broken up into a bajillion episodes, 1 to 2 minute episodes, really, filmed in a vertical aspect ratio. And it is like a soap opera on crack. How I would describe it.
Oh, and I forgot to say the other thing that you actually told me, that they're basically retelling stories that have already been told. So you might get the same story multiple times. Is that true?
It's very formulaic, I find, at least the ones we're working on. It's pretty much a retelling of almost the same story with like slightly different characters. I know we did one where we literally had like 3 acts where it was like a different bad guy doing almost the same thing in 3 acts a little bit. So yeah, it's incredibly formulaic, I would say, like what they're looking for in terms of like the good guy, the evil people, usually somebody discovering that they have $1 billion or that they're a secret princess or, something like that. It's very, very drama heavy.
ZOZO, I know I've seen these on Facebook. Like I know I've seen them on Facebook. Tell me your definition, ZOZO.
Yeah, so I think half of the stuff that I've worked on is kind of what like Sarah described. It's like soap opera on crack. It's very intense, a feature-length script chopped into little bits. And yeah, the scripts are very like trope heavy. Like they're very specific tropes being repeated over and over again. And I think what makes it a vertical is that they shoot in vertical format. They shoot in 9:16 because it's meant to be watched on a phone. And I think the most vague way to kind of describe a vertical like shoot is basically this is meant to be watched on your phone. It's never meant to be screened at a movie theater or anywhere else. It's meant to be watched on your phone, and that's what makes a vertical feature or vertical series a vertical. I have the thing that I just wrapped was slightly different. We all considered it a vertical, but we were actually shooting it in 16:9 and 9:16, and they are also delivering it in 1:1. So I know. And so when I shot, and this company is called Pocket FM. It's an Indian company that is an audio, and it's kind of like an audiobook platform. Where you buy a certain amount of credits and then you start listening, and then to unlock each chapter you have to buy more chapters basically. And so they kind of get you with, they leave you on a cliffhanger. And what we're shooting is actually just like a glorified advertisement, but a feature length advertisement. So this is like kind of different than the other verticals where we're basically shooting a movie, but we're shooting on a vertical schedule. But we are shooting in 16 by 9, but all the framing has to consider 9 by 16,
Mm.
which kind of blows your mind when you shoot it, because whenever you're framing up, you have to make sure that the subjects are within these lines, but you can still see everything here. So you still have to like put your background and like, like art and everything. You still have to dress it, because they might release it on Facebook, they might release it on Instagram, and they're gonna release it on TikTok. So you don't know where they're releasing it, and then judging by where they release it, that's how they're gonna crop it. So that's slightly different. And in that case, it's not really chopped up into episodes, it's just scenes. And then uh, besides like the main script, there was also like a bunch of alternate openings, alternate endings, like different montages. I have a lot of beef with how the script was formatted because they added a bunch of prefixes to the scene numbers. So every single scene had like at least a two-letter prefix. So our slates ended up being absolutely insane. Like we would have slates would be like RVAOB9 Charlie, and me and the second AC were just losing it in the sound mixer as well. But that was honestly the only way. Like I talked to Post before we started to shoot, and we were like, "This is the only way we can do it." Another interesting thing about this, and I'm sorry I'm going on forever, but it's a fascinating shoot because we actually shot the same script. Um, it's two scripts attached to each other. We shot it with one cast for the first 2 weeks, and then for the third and the fourth week, we shot the first script with a different cast, with the B cast, and the other script with a C cast. So we ended up having three leads, three different versions, three different guys playing the same lead.
Was that for different markets?
Yes, correct. So the first cast was our influencer cast. So they cast a bunch of kids who had like 2 million followers on TikTok and Instagram. And then for the B cast, our lead was Black. For the C cast, our lead was Latino. And so it was kind of strange, but they're like, we're doing this to reach different, demographics, and that's how we do it. And it's an Indian company, so very often there was a little bit of like questionable things written in the script that we would try to like, fix and be like, that's not very culturally sensitive and stuff like that. So it's things like that. But overall, going back to what a vertical is, in my opinion, a vertical is basically it's meant to be watched on your phone and not on a big screen, and that's kind of what it is in my opinion.
I think
Wow.
you brought up an interesting point, if I can jump in though. If you really think about it more as like it's a commercial platform. The way that the companies are viewing it as well and what you're shooting is all moments that you would find in a trailer or moments that they would use commercially to advertise, because what their goal is to get people hooked within the first, for us, it's 20 episodes, so that you continue to pay for the rest of it.
Yeah.
So it's really looking at what's going to draw people in and very commercial.
Yeah, and every episode has like a cliffhanger, So it's like the whole script is just full of cliffhangers everywhere. It's wild.
We'll talk more about format and all that. And I want to hear from Allison. And before I hear from Allison, I just want to say it sounds like all our worlds as filmmakers have collided, like drama, soap opera, commercial. Okay, Allison, what's your definition?
Basically, I'm nodding my head at everything here. That was really that thing is ZOZO. Did I say your name correctly? ZOZO. That what you just talked about is so interesting because that's new to the verticals.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a feature-length script divided into 75 to 90-second segments with cliffhangers, shot vertically. They're generally "Oops, I Married a Billionaire" format storyline or werewolf storyline. There was a third one I couldn't think of right now.
Eris.
Yeah, Eris, right? Eris. They often give me reference videos. Not often. Sometimes give me reference videos because these tropes the storylines are so repeated. There's always the towel drop for an intimacy coordinator. There's always the bathroom, the towel drop. I recently worked on more. They gave me a reference video. It was a video that I had done with the actor. Noah Fernley, who's like one of the top actors in this format. So I was like, oh, well, I'm glad they liked what I did. There's like the nipple kiss, like she falls and accidentally her mouth is like on his chest. It's so they're often advertised on TikTok or Facebook, but you get these apps and
Oh,
to watch them. And the first, just to clarify, the first like 6 to 10 or 20 are free, and then the rest you've got to pay for.
Mhm.
So it's like Drama Box, Dream, Dream Short, Good Short, Kalos, Love Shots, Meme Shorts, Mini Shorts, Real Short, Tubi, and that's just what, oh, Tubi, I don't know if you can include that, are just a few that I have on my phone.
wow. And Allison, as an intimacy coordinator, I'm assuming they never get X-rated, or do they?
Oh, great question. No, the first one I worked on had simulated sex, still not X-rated. Simulated sex, like R-rated. And I've worked on maybe like 5 to 6 that have simulated sex. The rest are all very PG. So making out, we often have like the clothes drop. You'll see them making out, and his shirt always has to come off. And we have to have the abs, the hand on the abs, her hand on his abs. Um, Sometimes her top comes off when she's wearing a bra. And maybe 5 or 6 of them, we've seen her bare back to suggest she's topless, but we don't ever see her breasts. Yeah, that's pretty much
Yeah.
the
Kate
parameter.
wrote in the chat, there for the female gaze. G-A-Z-E, not G-A-Y. That's a joke. But yes, so okay, so much to ask you guys, because this is a brand new, now you guys seem like there is a sort of a standard format-ish evolving. Oh, Zozo, I did want to, so you said half the ones you did were soap operas on crack. How would you describe the other half of the ones you did?
Well, the other half would be the ones that I did for Pocket FM, which were there were one of them was pretty soap opera-y, you know, it was about this woman falling pregnant and then hiding it from the guy, and 8 years later she runs into him in the hospital and stuff, so that was very soap opera-y. But then the one that I just wrapped was a full-blown like teenage vampire thing. It wasn't like, it was more sci-fi, and another one I did with them was also more sci-fi. And the source materials are usually web comics or mangas or something like that, and they're already very, very popular. Like the storyline is already very popular on their platform, and so they're just trying to push that even more, and that's why we adapt those. So they're less soap opera-y, and they're a little bit more like fun sci-fi, like vampires and stuff. Yeah.
This is so interesting because as a union member, and you guys are so close also as to being union members with all your experience, this sort of starts to verge on work we might do. So it's very, very, very interesting to start to see. And I'm sure that in the future, as things evolve in this kind of space, that they may actually go union, like commercials, sort of depending where you live, might be union or not. Let's talk about format. You guys mentioned it's usually a feature script. Are they divided into acts?
Not on the page necessarily, but I think once you start reading through it, you can tell like where your act one, act two, act three is. It's really just broken up, at least what I've seen so far, into those episodes. And really on set, it's just a reminder, I think, to the director, like, hey, this piece is your episode break. And again, really focusing on what we've done the first 20 episodes, because that's where everything is free viewing for people. So really making sure those cliffhangers and stuff are good. But yeah, we haven't seen one, at least I haven't, that is broken up into 3 acts on the page.
And everyone else, same idea?
Yeah, there's never really been clear acts. It's interesting how, Sarah, you've pointed out that you like focus more on the first few episodes because, you know, make them more cliffhanger. In my experience, we haven't really done that. Maybe they should have. Maybe that, you know. But the script is basically, you have your scenes, but then the episode breaks usually happen in the middle of a scene. And then the scripts that I've been receiving have been formatted in a way where when there's an episode break, it's a new scene. So sometimes you have a scene that's happening all in the same location. It's all continuous with all the same characters, but for some reason it's slated as four different scenes, and that really annoys me because then it gets really complicated both for the AD to make the schedule and for me to like slate it and line it, and it's just a hot mess. But when there's like an episode break, usually the director encourages the actor to kind of like lean into that episode break and kind of leave a cliffhanger. And I'm sure, Sarah, you've probably had this too. It's like, oh, once you say this line, pause for like 2 seconds so we can have a cut to black or something like that, and then keep on going with the scene.
That's so interesting. I have so many issues with script formatting as well. I think it's just because it comes from a different country. Typically, a lot of the ones we've made actually have already been made in another country, and we are now remaking them in English. So that's interesting. But we sometimes have had 20-page scenes,
Oh
which
my
is
God.
horrible, as I'm sure you all know. I think this one that I actually am taking a break on has an actual 20-page scene that is all in one location. So we've had some really, really long like doozies of scenes with like 16 people in them in one location. And that is a lot to keep track of.
That's like the opposite of my problem. Here is just too many scenes and you don't have enough.
I wish they would break mine up.
It sounds like a medium that's really still finding itself, really, and finding its audience. Allison, do you have any thoughts on format, how it differs from other stuff you've experienced in film?
Pretty much covered it. I just recently had one where they gave me the intimacy breakdown in episodes, but we normally speak about it in scenes. So I had to spend like 3 hours because there was a lot of intimacy, changing it, making it all specific to scenes. So that was just frustrating. Can we just all please talk about scenes because they're generally way shorter?
Do you ever get in the script supervisor breakdown? That's
No.
just no. Okay.
Would you like to?
Yeah, 'cause
Yes.
it would be so much easier. You wouldn't have to do all that work. It would be
Yeah.
breakdown for you already.
Because very often I don't really know who the intimacy coordinator is until they walk on set the day of. Like, they're not included in my distro. Like, they, at that point, probably haven't even hired them. So, like, it's good to know, though, Allison. Like, maybe from now on I can start just asking, like, hey, since intimacy coordinator is the head of department, like, they deserve a breakdown as well. So I could look for it. But usually I don't even know if there is going to be an intimacy coordinator.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten calls the night before. I got one call day of. One.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're definitely going to talk about prep because that's interesting. I usually talk to the IR in prep the intimacy coordinator, I mean, in prep, if I have prep, but I don't work on verticals. So I'm going to guess that you guys have a less prep even than we're facing in drama. But before that, I wanted to ask about, I'm just confused about the difference between an episode and a scene. Do you slate by episode or do you slate by scene?
Scene.
Always slay by scene, never by episodes. I could not care less about the episodes. They can decide that in post production.
Yeah, it
Because
seems
sometimes we shift it around too. Yeah.
exactly. Like they'll figure that out in the edit. And sometimes the episode break is in the middle of a scene. So
Oh, so I get it. So it's like act breaks in television where we break it down by scene. We indicate the act breaks in our breakdown. Are you guys indicating episode breaks in your breakdown too? Yeah. But you're not slating
Yeah.
by those act breaks. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in my scripts, the ones that I've usually been getting is whenever there is an episode break, it starts a new scene. So even if it's the same location, same characters, it's still like a different scene. And so in my breakdown, I have a special column for like which episode this scene belongs to. But generally, I don't really refer to it as much. Like the scenes are what really matters. It just gets really annoying when like a 6-page long scene gets chopped up into 4 different episodes. And
so much. I've had extensive conversations with the production company I'm working with to try and finesse how we're breaking down everything and like getting it in a little bit of a better spot before we distro to everybody. Because it's stuff like that that gets so confusing for like wardrobe and makeup and hair and all of that as well. So
And otherwise, does it look like a regular script, like typed out in Final Draft for your font? Okay, so it's like that with slug lines, but the slug lines are for scenes. And then maybe how do
Yeah.
they indicate the episode end? Just like like an act end, like with a centered episode end?
Not for me, it's not centered. It's usually left aligned and it just says
Okay.
episode whatever, either before or after the slug line. I honestly don't remember.
Mhm.
Okay, this is really fascinating to me as a writer as well. Stephanie in the chat says, so to clarify, you get the full feature script that is broken into episodes and you prep the whole thing before shooting the first.
Mhm.
Both
Correct.
both as a
Yes.
supervisor and an intimacy coordinator. Okay, great. This is great intel. Okay, so we know prep is an ongoing battle in the non-union world on any film project. How do you notice a difference between indie filmmaking and prep on vertical features? Let's start with Zozo.
Yeah, there already isn't enough prep in indie non-union filmmaking, and there's even less prep on the verticals that I've worked on. And partially maybe it's my fault because I'm not fighting for it as much as I should be. I'm a very bad negotiator. I try my best, but I'm really bad at it.
Thought you had Zozo. You
I
gotta
know I need to be better. I know it's a work in progress. But yeah, we don't get much prep, and it's also a very short turnaround for prep. And they also change up the script, very close to shooting. And whenever they make changes, they sometimes like rename all the scenes, or they like don't lock it down and they don't have actual official revisions to it. So it kind of makes things a little bit more complicated. With this shoot that I just wrapped, prep was an absolute nightmare. Like, I enjoy doing prep. I love doing breakdowns. It's super fun. I love like trying to imagine like how much time has passed, like like all this stuff. And but with this shoot, it was such a nightmare because they first of all they kept changing the script and they kept renaming the scenes. So both the director and the AD, like the director literally got like physical neck pain, like debilitating neck pain from the prep because of how much of a nightmare it was. And it mostly just comes from because we had clients above us that were very involved in the process. They had a lot of opinions about a lot of things and they would constantly change things, but at the same time, they're not very aware of the filmmaking process. So they don't understand that changing things so close to shooting, how much it affects our process. So that was kind of brutal. So prepping that thing was an absolute nightmare, especially considering they had a lot of like alternate openings and alternate endings, but then some of them like canonically would not make any sense, and I would just be there like banging my head against the wall, be like, "This doesn't make any sense," like this doesn't fit. But at the end of the day, I gotta remind myself like they're advertisements, like it's not. It actually won't matter as much if it's not continuous, or if if the main character is wearing something slightly different, even though it's the same day. Like I just have to let that go. Yeah, but I was not, there was not enough prep on this, and that's all I can say. It was also more than I expected. Like there was more to do in prep and more revisions to be done than I thought there was going to be.
This is just a frame of reference for people. Normally on union shows, we get a minimum, well, not every union show either, because every local is different. But the LA standard where ZOZO works is 10 days in the union for prepping a feature film.
I
And
got one day. I got one day for a 6 day shoot. So,
they've,
and then like a 60-page script. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's not even enough to, I think, to break it down and, especially and think of all the questions and get your questions answered. And Sarah, what's been your experience of prep?
Yeah, so it's also quite short. Usually 2 to 3 days is what I get for about a 10-day shoot. Um, so I feel pretty lucky in that. Don't get a wrap day. I also don't wrap. I said if they're not going to pay me for wrap, then they're not going to get that, and they were fine with it. The few things that I find are a little bit different. They don't seem to care about timing. So I've never had to pre-time anything. They also don't care about timing on set. So that's one thing that I've just taken out because we do move so quickly. I'm looking at where I can kind of streamline what I'm doing a little bit. So I've stopped timing on set. They don't care about it. I feel like in prep, the other thing that doesn't really seem to matter, time of day.
Mhm.
Doesn't really matter. The story days is really what my main focus is, and that's something that I'll usually like tussle with production with a little bit to make sure that that makes sense because it really bothers me. And they usually give that to me to make
Yeah.
sure that makes sense. Like putting dates on anything, They don't care. Production is also not going to like go out of their way necessarily to do like calendars and like you just don't see that on our sets anyway. So those are some of the things I've taken out of my prep because it doesn't really matter. Our scripts are usually 90 to 100 pages, I would say, is like where most of ours live. What else for prep?
There's meetings and rehearsals too, right? But maybe you don't go to them.
Yeah, I usually don't go to them. We're not invited typically. The page turn is like the one thing that they're really great about making sure we're a part of. And if I don't have a chance to talk to a director ahead of time, that's where I bust out my like 50 questions that I have.
Right.
And they're used to that at this point if I'm not able to, talk to the director or production ahead of time. We go through all of that during the page turn.
Production meeting?
Usually kind of our page turn is the production meeting. Not gonna
Oh,
lie. I'm sure they have like additional ones for like departments ahead of time, but right now we sometimes only have 4 days a turnaround before we start the next one.
wow.
It's where we're at right now. Like they're trying to get in as many as possible before Christmas. So the last time around, I was prepping 2 scripts at the same time so that once we wrapped one, I could go straight into a page turn and had a rough, breakdown ready to go before we jumped into the next one. And I think that one we had a 4-day turnaround. I think we've also had a 2-day turnaround.
Oh, wow. It sounds like you're working pretty much for the same company. Is that accurate?
I am, yeah, which I'm really loving. And I'm sure there's probably very different experiences based on which company you've kind of been working for. The reason I got into this is because I knew one or two of the people on some of the other films that I was doing. And like I said, when all that dried up, they were like, "Hey, Sarah, are you by chance at all maybe willing to?" And I was like, look, I'm not going to turn down my nose at work. And I knew those folks, and it's a really great working environment, I have to say. They are really great about trying to use the same crew over and over again, getting you a schedule ahead of time so you can plan like your vacations or when you go home to see, your parents. And so I do think there's some pros that come out of that if you do find a great company and group of people you like to work with. They're excellent about saying like, hey, if you need a break, if you need a day off, if you need to take this shoot off, take it. You will come back. We will hire you back as long as, they like you and you're doing your job, of course. So I have been working with the same company the last like 6 months, and that's been great. They feed us well. They're very careful about hours. They hate overnights, so we do very little overnights. So I would say while it's very quick and dirty when you're like in there and you're doing it and the prep is very quick, the hours are really lovely and people are great, and I'm not coming home like super, super exhausted every single day.
Oh, wow. Oh, before I ask Allison about prep and working with different companies, I want to know, is it a 10-hour day?
A lot of the times for me, it's close to a 10 or 11-hour day, I would say. We very rarely go over 12. I think this last one that was the first time we had like quite a bit of overtime. It was a Christmas special that the production company seemed to care about quite a bit. So we had 3 days of overtime. But I think on the one previous to that, I had no overtime and I was coming in probably closer to 10 or 11 hours total for the day with my wrap.
Oh, with your notes wrap. Oh, great, great.
Yeah.
Allison, I think you work for all the companies, right?
Yeah, I'm not company specific. But I mean, so there's the platform, the app, and then there is whoever's producing it for that app. So there's certainly a lot of producers who call me repeatedly. I've worked for one like 7 times. I just worked with the director for like the 4th time. There is one app that I know of in town called Real Short that
So
they produce for themselves. Oh, you work for Real Short? Is that it?
Real Short is who I work for.
Yeah, so in LA they self-produce. So the one I just worked on that was 6 days. They usually use another intimacy coordinator, but the director had worked with me before, so he requested me. They all had their set crew otherwise. Yeah, so I just took some notes to respond to from the conversation because I want to make sure that I'm always specific to script supervision, don't go off on my own thing. I do find that a lot of things are changed on the fly. It's interesting because especially dialogue is often changed on the fly because I think a lot of these things are not written in English, and then they're often translated by, we assume, AI. So a lot of those words are translated on the fly. But then again, they do often want to stick to the exact definition of exactly the action that was described. We talked about some things, renaming some scenes or renaming, putting new numbers by scenes, I find the project is often renamed. So I actually went to IMDb once. I was like, oh, I wonder who the IC was on that project. Oh, it was me because they renamed it. When ZOZO talked about not caring if it makes sense, it's so hard. You know, you have to let so many things go when you want to do a good job. But yes, I do find that, like, once I thought this director just didn't like me. And then I realized he just was so focused on, he finally said, this makes no sense. Those people would not know to burst into the room. How would they know it? And he was just so focused on trying to figure out what the problem was and how to make it make sense. Someone mentioned rehearsals. I find that on maybe 7% of them, I get a rehearsal, an outside day rehearsal. I think that covered things that I heard discussed.
Zozo, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to just piggyback off of what Sarah was saying about like crews and the different production companies. So I mostly worked with two separate production companies. One of them was Pocket FM, which is like the audio platform, and then the other one, I think the platform is called Shorts. I think that's what it is. And they are the same producers. The crew is mostly the same. The people that they like working with, they just keep rehiring the same people. And their schedule is kind of like a 6-day shoot. They usually do 3 on, 1 off, 3 on. And then 2 weeks later, they do the next one. So it's a little bit longer of a turnaround time than I think what Sarah's describing, but that's kind of how they work. And yeah, and I think the thing about this whole process is that post-production is very, very intense on these. Like the shoot that I just wrapped, because the first 2 weeks we were shooting with one cast. When we started shooting week 3 and 4, they were already cutting the first cast. By the time we wrapped yesterday, they pretty much had their final delivered version for the first cast 2 weeks later. So it's pretty interesting. And in terms of like timing, yeah, they never asked me to pre-time anything. They don't really care about timing. I've never had anyone ask me how long was the scene running for. And those are the things that they don't really care that much about. They do care about circle takes quite a bit just because of how intense the post-production process is. And also, I don't know, there's some other things that I'll talk about, but I can bring it up later. But mostly about the crew thing is that, yeah, like they usually, when they find a crew that they like, they usually stick to that and keep doing it over and over. These are Indian producers that I have an on-set editor. So the client is an Indian company, but within the Indian company, they do have American and based in America executive producers. So they're not fully Indian. It's just like the parent company is Indian. And we don't have an on-set editor. For the other one, the non-Indian production, we had a DIT who was also basically the assistant editor. And for this one, there was no on-set editors, but they have like 5 editors working on this at the same time, basically. Because the script are like chopped up into pieces, they would just go, and they had like a post-production supervisor. We also have VFX as well. So there was also like all these VFX editors. So it's quite a big post team for such a low budget shoot. But it's because they have to crank them out so fast. And sometimes clients will be on set, sometimes they wouldn't be, which is hard for me because I am very, very bad at controlling what I say. Like I have no filter when I'm in Video Village. It gets tough sometimes. But yeah, so it kind of depends. How many setups in a day? I'd say about 50 to 60 setups. What's interesting is that on this shoot that I just wrapped, the DP prefers to shoot from one side first and then relight and then shoot the other side, which is how I prefer it to be done because it just looks way nicer. But then the other shoot, they do cross coverage. I mean, I guess it's great for continuity because, you know, you can always cut it together no matter what as long as you're using the same take. But it just looks very bland and it really limits you in blocking and just everything else. Like it's very limiting because it's mostly on sticks. It's all on sticks.
Do you ever work on improv? Because I work as a comedy script supervisor. I do a ton of improv stuff, and you have to cross shoot.
No, they don't encourage improv.
Okay.
Not really. No, and even if there is, like, I highly doubtful it will make it into the cut because there's also a lot of with the Pocket FM thing. There's a lot of restrictions as to what can be. It's very strange because, for example, there was this moment where in the script, very obviously, it was like this character. He's in his tidy whities and he's making out with his girlfriend. And then the producers in Village is like, I don't think we can show this on TikTok. Like, male nipples are not allowed on TikTok. Like, that's gonna get, like, it's gonna get restricted or, like, as an advertisement. Like, it's gonna get flagged in some way or in another. Because, you know, the algorithm can't tell the difference between male or female nipples, I guess. And so that was weird because I'm like, this script literally went through you guys for so many times, so many revisions, and nobody ever flagged that. And then we already shot the scene, and she's like, "Oh, I don't think we can show nipples." So I don't know how they're gonna cut around
We
that.
have to hear from
Uh,
Allison about this specifically. Have you been
yeah.
given any guidelines?
It varies by platform too. Like
Yeah,
different platforms have different guidelines. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think TikTok, out of all the platforms, is the most restrictive about get some alternate takes without that. Let's get some clean
That's how we
ones.
would do it in drama, right? Just get some alternate takes and some alternate coverage, right? I'm already hearing filmmakers in LA say, well, I want to do a vertical, but I want to do a cinematic movie for adults, like for, you know what I mean? Like, not that these are not for adults, but you know what I mean? More adult content. I'm already hearing that. I don't know. Have you guys experienced that already where you're working with like quote unquote legit filmmaker, or is it still very much fully in the realm of commercial?
The team that I worked on recently they're extremely like they have a lot of experience and visually it looks really good. It's just a script that's kind of like childish. But visually and just like in terms of like the blocking and the actors were also extremely professional and really on top of it. So it's kind of a shame because at this point it feels like it's the scripts that are limiting us. We could totally make this like a gorgeous looking thing, you
I
know.
know a lot of writers who would love to make them better, but they're haven't even heard about the format. I think some of them are here today. Sarah, I wanted to ask you about budget because when we were in Atlanta, you were saying that they pour more of the budget into those first 20 before people have to pay. Do you want to speak on that? And do you guys get a sense of what the budgets are?
I get a sense because I ask. But yes, it does seem like that is pretty consistent here. They are always most concerned with our top 20, making sure it looks the best. They're sticking kind of mostly to the script. There's not as many dialogue changes. Most of our like set deck and stuff will be very focused on that. Not that we don't kind of continue to try and do a good job for the rest of it. But yes, that's a very consistent thing. And then after that, I feel like the directors feel they have a little bit more leeway to change things, change dialogue, change action, improvise a little bit with how they're shooting things. But the first 20 tends to be pretty consistent with making sure we're sticking to like production guidelines there and making it look amazing. And that's very true to what ZOZO was saying is, especially this last one we shot, looked gorgeous. However, we have gotten notes back from studio telling us that it looks too cinematic and they want it, yeah, they want it to be more flat.
So many notes about how it's too dark.
Yep,
Like,
they
ah!
really big lighting. They don't want anything looking too dark, too moody. So really like beauty lighting. And I think you can see that a lot in the casting. I think this is changing a little bit now, but a lot of our male leads, speaking about how it's like from a female gaze, come from like modeling agencies. So they sometimes don't know much about acting. And then the female leads are usually like our true like actresses who are coming from like LA or New York or, you know, some from here and are the ones who are supposed to be a little bit more like your everyday girl who falls in love with this like beautiful model. So again, it's kind of all about appearances, I think, in that respect. What else did I want to say? We're usually doing up to like 80 setups a day, close to that, 2 cameras as well. Same as what ZOZO was saying, sometimes cross coverage. We also try and do everything from one side and then turn. Very often, we're very limited on blocking because there are literally scenes with like 16 people in them. But in that regard, for actors, I think it's especially hard because we don't have time to go through the entire scene over and over and over and over again for everybody. So we're shooting in like these mini little like blocking setups. So we really try and get our groups kind of set up. And a lot of it is like walking, planting, saying all of your dialogue.
Oh my God.
And we're just jumping around getting everybody's dialogue because it's so cutty in the edit. There's not really many moving shots. It's mostly on sticks. We do use a little bit of Ronin in our production. Sometimes we try and push for a little bit more of a cinematic thing and see if we can get away with it. But it's not a ton of movement unless it's like two people in a scene, just because you don't have time to get it all. But it's always like either full or you see like a cowboy. They want to make sure you can always see everybody's shoulders in the frame. So yeah, we have very specific things that they like. Every line of dialogue pretty much has to be on camera. They always want to be able to see two eyes, so they don't like a ton of profile. They really need it to be mostly to camera. So we've got a lot of very specific things that they like in terms of what the frame looks like, which I find really interesting. So you can't get away with, I find that like actors and what they have in their hands and that kind of continuity matters. Very hard to do when your lead guy is a model and not necessarily an actor, although they want to learn, but that's something that usually goes by the wayside. But because it's so cutty and you're just cutting to this person's line and this person's line and that person's line, they don't tend to care about physical continuity very much.
Wow, I saw what Zozo wrote, a cut every 3 seconds max, so no runners allowed. So you're always shooting.
Yeah, and our DP has a lot of beef about that, but that's what we can do. There was one time when it was basically a mutiny where he decided to only have one setup for the scene. He's like, they can just use that because he doesn't want them to chop it up. Every time he tries to make like a fun reveal shot or like a nice rack focus, whatever, they just cut that shit up. So yeah, it's
recently with like this beautiful like tracking dolly shot, and they didn't use any of it. I don't think they didn't use any of it.
it's because of audience retention. Like they need to be, there needs to be a cut every like 2-3 seconds.
Allison, I want to talk to you about cast because you work so closely with them. Is there a good, it sounds like there's an evolution of like people that are being known for these, like you said, are known, what else can you tell us about? I mean, obviously they're all, is it non-union or are some of them SAG?
I worked on one or two that were SAG. I think my first one was SAG back June of 2023, whatever.
Oh,
And I
nice.
think one other that had a contract.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that was, yeah, great.
I was shocked. And so now I put on my checklist to ask because there are different rules. Obviously, we all know, but I stopped asking because they have to have intimacy agreements 48 hours before we shoot for a SAG. And that rarely happens, very rarely happens with these non-union ones. I'll continue on about cast, but the one thing I've noticed, they do like to have a little dolly revealing bodies. They like to go down the bodies sometimes. That's about it. Yeah, there's certain people who are known. I don't know if it's because they, how they started into it, but like Jared Harper does a ton of these, and Noah Fernley, who I worked with a few times, does a ton of these. There are females who have done 6, 7, 8 of them, but
they're starting to give yearly contracts to some of the leads. I just spoke with 2 actors on our last who have been opposite each other often, and they, I think both, or at least one, is on a yearly contract, getting paid like a lump sum to do 15 of these a year or something like that.
This is wild. We're going right back to the Hollywood studio system. That's kind of wild.
I was about to say that. We're like reverting back to 100 years ago.
But that might be a good thing. You know how many of us as actors miss the Hollywood studio system because you always knew you had work coming up. Not that I was like, I'm not 100 years old, but the people we go, wouldn't it be nice to be like a contract player and know that you had a certain number of jobs to do? Plus they would, they would give in the Hollywood studio system, they would give the actors acting lessons. I wonder if they're doing that with the models they put on contract.
Well, I would say that yes, the talent does vary quite a bit. I mean, these people who are working a lot are because they check all those boxes as far as they're visual. They're some are very physically attractive, but those ones who work a lot are really also quite good. Yeah, there's a wide variety because there's also more entry level.
Yeah, it varies quite a bit, which has been so interesting. But I've seen a couple of like really stellar performances. I'm sorry, coming from an acting background, I just have to say that have taken these scripts that on page are, they're questionable sometimes, and have really elevated the material and made like the evil character so fun and dynamic and really done a lot with the dialogue. It's really impressive. And they're usually theater actors, just want to say.
Yeah, it's really hard, especially like being a lead on one of these shows because you need to like have a 9 pages of dialogue memorized every single day. Like, and you get 2 takes tops, and then you got to move on. So we've had a few actors who, when I mentioned like we had an influencer cast, so a lot of them were not trained actors. And unfortunately, our lead was pretty good, but we had one that was kind of a side character, and there was this one day where all her scenes were on that day and she just could not handle it. And honestly, I really empathize with her because like it was also a lot of very similar scenes because they're all alternate scenes, so like the dialogue was only slightly different, the blocking was only slightly different, and so it was hard. So being an actor on these verticals is really not as easy as you would think. You'd be like, oh, verticals, it's low intensity, low stress, but it's actually I feel like it's the other way around. Like it's really, and they'll barely get any rehearsals either. Like in my experience, there's like one run through rehearsal that's a blocking rehearsal, a rehearsal, and a camera rehearsal all wrapped together in one. And then you're like, okay, last looks, we're shooting it.
And it's so technical because, especially if you're shooting in that vertical and not like the horizontal that you guys were doing, but are very specific marks. You're much closer to actors than normal. And there's not as much leeway to move because literally shifting just a little bit, you're seeing totally different things in the background. Like a very minute camera movement completely changes what you're seeing. It's
Yeah.
not forgiving in that respect. So I think they have to be incredibly technically savvy when hitting marks and looking for their light. And our camera does too, because you just can't move it as much.
They get the scripts. I mean, I've worked with people who have not had a chance to read the full script before. We had to replace an actor once. They got the script like the night before. And usually the number one is in every scene. Every scene. That person has no break. So often and just to go, the replacement is often because they had another job come up or they didn't read the script and now they see that there's content they prefer not to do. So I'm not trying to act like it's a nasty sort of thing. So I often get hired or get the actor contact information when they're already in production, if I'm not coming into like the 6th day and I need to have a pre-production conversation with them. But when do I do it? They have no downtime. It's often when they're driving home late at night.
It's very much like a soap in that way.
Wow. And I also, as a script supervisor and even as an intimacy coordinator, let's talk about the technical difference, like how this impacts our job on a technical level in terms of, well, I know framing is one thing. Zozo, go ahead.
Yes. So it is, I've noticed it is very different. Well, first of all, huge amounts of page count for a shoot day. Like the pacing is insane. So you're constantly moving on, you're constantly reframing. There's barely any time between setups or even between scenes. So just being on top of like what scene is next, how to slate it, communicating with the second AC and the sound mixer are extremely important because you literally have no time to adjust. And just really streamlining your note-taking process is also extremely important because the moment you are even slightly behind, you don't get a chance to catch up. You're just behind. It's just stacking up, And so that's a tricky part. Another thing that I notice is that, and I've also heard this feedback from many producers and directors who have worked with other script supervisors before and decided that they're not a good fit for verticals. It's because they would get too hung up on like small details. And with being on a vertical with such a fast-paced shoot, you really, really have to be able to discern what is important, what really matters, and what doesn't. Because in our job, we notice a lot of things, but maybe only like those 2 small things actually matter, whether it's dialogue or it's continuity, it's a wardrobe thing, it's like a thing in the background that shouldn't be there. So it really is knowing what actually matters and then bringing it up, and if something doesn't matter, just let it go and don't like distract the director or other department heads with it because it's just going to delay the whole process. And I think that's something that is extra important on a vertical, is kind of being able to tell what is crucial and what isn't, and just to be able to let things go sometimes.
Allison, I noticed that you had some of your like set photos and the monitors are vertical. That blew me away.
Yeah, I remember the first time I walked into my first vertical. I remember the moment. It was that place downtown that closed for people who worked on the verticals, that crazy space with the flying books in the library. And I remember walking down the hallway and seeing those vertical monitors for the first time. whoa, yeah.
What are the cameras like? Are they similar to indie film cameras or are they phones?
No, we have
Uh,
similar to
yeah.
indie phone cameras. I mean, not like as fancy sometimes, but yeah, they're similar. We've never shot on a phone.
Yeah, I've heard of some shoots out there that straight up shoot on a phone, but I've never been involved in those, and the rates for those are insanely low, and they usually don't even hire a script supervisor. So the ones that I'm on usually like a Red or like a Sony, like they and then they just turn the camera sideways.
Sarah, I want you to, because you were talking about eye lines in Atlanta. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the same as what Zozo has said as well. Like, first of all, being able to let things go. I just want to reiterate that if anybody decides to step into the vertical world, being really, really good about just calmly saying like, does that bother you? No? Okay, then we're moving on, just because most of that stuff the network doesn't care about and your director doesn't have time to deal with, to be honest. And so my very first one was like this big action film, and I literally remember, you guys, this killed me. We were doing this big scene where like people were being shot and like there was like a big butcher with a hammer running around. And then we get back to it and like the dead people just disappeared off of the floor and all their weapons were gone. And I was like, do we care that they're not there anymore? And they're like, nah, we don't care. So like right away, second day in, I was like, oh, I understand the assignment. Okay. So the big thing I do think that matters is framing and eye lines. You don't get away with as much. Again, I think because of how little, how little you see on the sides, eye lines really seem to matter. And you're cheating things in a very extreme way sometimes. So physically in a room where somebody was standing before is probably not where they're going to be at all when we go to the other side. You're cheating everything, I find, very, very close to camera, and stuff that you're like, well, that doesn't make sense in the real world when I'm looking at it. It makes sense on camera. And it's really, really different, I find, from horizontal filming.
And you were saying that the eye lines are much closer to lens than we'd think that.
Way closer to the lens. I find that we're literally stacking people like behind each other, you know, for eye lines, just because they want everything so close to camera. They want to see faces. So we're cheating really, really close to camera, usually on turnarounds. But it does make sense when you go back and like look at an edit. It tends to work, and cheating things in a room so that it makes sense on camera feels very different than I think on a horizontal. I don't know if you find that as well, Zozo, but that's the main thing that I feel like I had to kind of wrap my brain around when I got onto one of these.
In my experience, like cheating hasn't been that severe as you're describing, but eyeline definitely. Like we always prefer them to look as close to camera as possible. It's almost like a POV shot at that point.
And
Yeah.
someone was saying in the chat that in her first vertical, the director said there's no such thing as crossing the line, but that can't be true if it's all faces and looks, right?
I think it matters. Crossing the line does matter. That's something that, again, you're working with such a wide variety, I think, of people and experience levels, that's something I think we can really bring on set, because we do have a lot of, I mean, our camera folks, I think at this point really know what they're doing, but like our directors are usually a little bit newer directors, or they've just done like shorts, or they've come from like a first AD world, which is great, I find. But that I think really does matter if we're looking at it. One of one of the ones we just did, I've looked at some of the footage and he was like, well, it doesn't matter. Everything is so close to frame. And it does matter. It looks really weird.
Can we talk about your directing experience and how, let's just talk about how that came to be and if you would do it again?
I would 100% do it again. I think it's a really great place to kind of like cut your teeth and figure it out in a little bit of I find a lower stakes environment, while it's moving really, really quickly and you have to make decisions really fast. You know, I think that it's forgiving in a way of like who's watching it, if we're going to be honest. So it's a good place, I think, to learn. I've been working as a script supervisor for them for a couple of movies, and we had the big hurricanes that came through. So we had to actually cancel a day of shooting and push everything. And our director had to go to a wedding. So they asked if I would be willing to step in for most of a day to just kind of do the directing. And I said, sure, what are we going to do for script supervisor? So I literally took our office PA, who was just so sweet, and in the morning just showed her like the very basics of how to take notes and line stuff. And then that afternoon I got to jump into directing. And luckily I worked really closely with our previous director about like what he kind of had envisioned for everything. I knew our first really, really well. So between the two of us, I think we just kind of like banged it out and got it done. And it was a lot of fun. They've asked me to return to do a full one at some point. So hopefully I'll be able to do that next year, which I'm super excited about. It's again, a group of people I absolutely love and adore, and everybody knows what they're doing at this point. It's like very like clockwork. So I think it'll be a good environment to start in.
Oh my God. And Allison, 50 of these, and you're an intimacy coordinator and a performer. I see you directing too if you want to.
Yes, I've thought, because I direct theater, and the last like 3 months, all it keeps going around in my brain is, especially with these producers I've worked with several times, it's like, how do I broach the topic?
Just ask.
So I really
Yeah.
need to broach that topic.
Yeah. It's weird that we feel like we can't ask, right? But
Yeah.
the second you ask and you put it in somebody's brain, because I think that's where it came from me as well, is just saying like, yes, I just recently directed a short. I have an interest in it. And our first being like, oh, Sarah wants to direct. Did you know? It like gets into people's brains a little bit. And we just have to ask. The worst thing that somebody can say is no, right?
Well, I think for me, part of the hesitation is I've also worked with many directors several times, and I don't want anyone to think I'm stepping on their toes. But what's happened is some of these producers who work with the same director several times, maybe one time that director isn't available or isn't interested in that script for whatever reason. So then I show up on the set and it's a different director, and I'm like, oh, I should have planted the seed, because then they could have gone to me.
Yeah.
But I don't want to step on. I'm very grateful for these people who have me over several times, over and over. And a lot of these directors, they also have over and over, who are great and know what they're doing, and I love working with. So,
ZOZO, do you ever want to direct?
Yeah, I have thought about it, and it's been kind of in my mind more and more lately. I don't think I'm in any rush to do it, but I've definitely, I'm familiar with the script supervisor to director pipeline. It's very real, and I have slowly realized why that is real. It's because truly, like, we are right there, like, in the heat of it. Like, we're kind of, like, we see everything, we're involved with everything, and it just makes sense. And it's definitely something that I'm open to. The only thing that's kind of stopping me is I don't write. I don't like writing. I don't want to write, so I need to like find a script.
I think it's a different job. I can connect you to many of my writing students who have a lot of scripts they would like made. So
hey,
or you
let's
could
team up, because because and also another thing is like I know so many people, like as a script supervisor who has worked on so many different projects with so many different producers. I could easily put together like a star team of like a whole crew together, just because of how many different things I've worked on and how many people I know. So
I'm gonna make a comment that I didn't think I'd be making. Like the more I hear you guys talk about that experience, I didn't realize actually how much it sounds like they respect the script supervisor more so than other indie experiences, and I'm really surprised by that.
Yes, this is very interesting. Like, they really care about the presence of a script supervisor, which I did find surprising when I first got into verticals. That the producers, really wanted one and really wanted a good one there. And I think a lot of it is because of what I mentioned before, because of their super short post-production turnaround time. And also the fact that they cannot afford any reshoots. The ones that I've been on can't afford overtime either. So I think they've all at some point down the line have realized how important a script supervisor is. And then since then they've been like, yeah, we need to get one. But yeah, in the beginning I was like, this is such a low budget production. I'm surprised they even want a script supervisor at all. And it turns out they do, because they at some point have realized how big of an impact our presence makes, and how much more streamlined their post process is because of us being there. So yeah, it's definitely, you make a really good point. Like, I have noticed that our position is quite valued. And I think one thing, and this is what I wanted to add before, when Sarah mentioned the first AD, like, having a good first AD on a vertical makes or breaks the shoot. Like, it is wild how huge of a difference it makes. And like on regular shoots, yes, but especially on like verticals like this, where it's fast paced, where every single person needs to like, we all need to like mind meld and be one together. Like, a good first AD is so crucial. And having a first AD that communicates with me very well is an incredible experience, and it's been really wonderful the past 4 weeks that I've been working. I was blessed with like a really good first AD, and he honestly made everything so much better.
When I negotiate, there are certain things that I ask for, obviously, and one of them I asked for the first time recently. And who's your first AD?
I'm so lucky that we have mostly the same first AD that works on most of them. And because it's the director who's new every single time, I find that myself and the first are the team. And we understand the timing, and when we are behind, I can come up with suggestions if we are having an issue with something in order to like save time. She's also like so great about knowing how to save time with blocking. So if we do have a director that's in a bit of a bind, or we see is kind of going off the rails with what we can do, it's been so great for us to step in, and they've been so open to taking suggestions for how to block something, where to put cameras. Sometimes I'm finding I have a lot of say in order to decrease the number of eye lines that we have to shoot is one of the main things. We're usually filming, I don't know about you guys, but maybe anywhere on our nicest day, maybe 8 pages, and on a hard day, like 12 plus pages, but usually right around that is what we're looking at in a day. So that first AD script supervisor team, I find, is really incredible on these verticals.
And the DOP?
Yeah, we have the same kind of group that we work with. So it's usually one of 3 people, and they cycle through them, which is really fun. We don't have second ACs. We have 2 firsts. The other thing that's really weird on ours, and I'm curious if this is on anybody else's, they don't have a physical slate. It's all verbally slated. So notes are incredible. Yeah, I know. My first day there, I was like, what? What are you talking about? But they don't have an actual physical slate because there's nobody to do the slating. We have just 2 firsts. One of them is the DP, one is the BCam operator, and our sound person is verbally slating everything. So I'm working very closely with our sound people. One of them has a microphone for me, and I just whisper into my microphone this every single time. It's really fun. I feel really fancy about the slate because that's the only way DIT is getting everything downloaded correctly. So our notes end up being incredibly important for all of that. And then, like she was saying, circle takes are very important as well. And I tend to force our production to cut a little bit more because they really love those rolling takes.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why
Ugh.
one thinks that saves any
Oh my
time,
God.
but I just keep being like, hey, remember Mike, our editor, hey, do this for Mike. And they've
Just
gotten
keep passive aggressively, like keep saying, still rolling, still rolling.
or just go, you think we should cut?
Yep, yep.
But like I said, since it's a group of people that work together so much, I feel I have a lot more leeway to be vocal about those things and be taken seriously.
Allison said you had some advice about negotiating.
Yes, I don't know advice, but just things I'd love to chat about.
Yeah, I have advice.
Well, yeah, I guess, things that I ask for that I don't think other people are asking for that I think we all should ask for. How about that? They're pretty standard contracts. I think we all get the general, format of what they're, and they, most of them these days say they can fire us at any time for any reason. And some of them say they can end or they could terminate the contract with 30 days notice, which is great because normally I get less than 30 days notice. But then they say if we are terminated, they will only pay for work done up to that termination. And I always ask now you can only terminate me in less than 30 days for cause. And if for any reason besides force majeure, we don't shoot, you have to pay me for that day.
Great.
Because I turn down other work. And so many of these don't get permits, and then they get reported, and then they have to not shoot for that day. Look, I'll work with you if you're going to change it to another day and I'm not working. I'll work with you. But if I've turned down other work, I can't not get paid for that day. And I feel strongly about this. And I actually just said this to another production yesterday. It wasn't a vertical. I think they're probably now looking for another intimacy coordinator.
Sometimes that happens to me. I'm currently negotiating a series and I may be told, I have been told, oh, you're asking for a lot. I'm asking for what I ask for every time, and we can negotiate. And or not, or you can talk to someone else. That's what we have to, one of my mentors told me that a long time ago. You have to know what you're worth and be willing to walk away if the answer is no. And I think that's been a great way to live for me, first of all. But I know, if I was younger, if I was like Zozo's age, I might be more. But when I was younger, I was not getting 1 day of prep. I was getting 5 days of prep, which is still half, but it was 5 days. I can't even believe what companies are pulling these days. But time besides prep, is there other stuff you guys get pushed back? How are rates comparable to indie rates? Are they better? Are they worse? Do they vary?
I think they're in the process of changing, in my opinion. I think right now they're still a little worse. I know I took a bit of a pay cut from what I was doing, and they had even, I think, raised it from their last script supervisor, I think based on experience, not by much. But I am seeing rates coming out of other states that are getting a little bit better. So I am hopeful as this becomes more and more popular that we're going to see a little bit more money put into it and therefore an increase in rates. But I would say it's still quite low, in my opinion.
I mean, the money's going somewhere. They have five editors. Go ahead, Zozo.
Yeah, I'd say the rates are comparable to other low budget indie stuff that I would have been doing. The day rate is usually 350, and but I know there are verticals out there that are less than that. There are ones 250, 300. But I set a limit for myself. Like, I won't go under 350 at this point. But there are also, I know that there's another one out there that's 400 a day with a $10 kit fee. So that's kind of the range that it is at right now. So, like, it's not awful, but have heard some stories about there not being parity among department heads.
Oh,
So I have heard of like the hair and makeup costumes and script supervisor department are making less than all the other department heads. And so there are situations like that happening. I always go around set and ask people what they're making. Just in case, Especially if I'm gonna be working with the same production company over and over again. I don't want to be screwed over and over again. So yeah, there's definitely that. But it's not much, and it's nice that it's regular work, but that's also how they get you. It's like, oh, it's regular work. Or like this past thing, it was like, oh, it's 21 days of shoot. Like, you're gonna make like 7,000 for a month. Like, that's a lot of money. I was like, okay, sure, if you put it that way, but that's not how we calculate it. So it's a little different, but it honestly just depends. And I also feel like we were still coming out of the whole strikes and everything going down. But lately, like things, I don't know. I speak for myself and like kind of my bubble and circle of people here in LA. Things have been picking up because more and more people, when I'm like, hey, can you take this job? I try to refer it to them, or like I try to find a replacement. There's no one available.
Mm.
yeah.
And so more and more people are getting work, and that will help us be able to up our rates and like negotiate.
It is a very interesting time because literally the strike, we had all this hardship and this tidal wave of vertical work came in. And I think like, I think that maybe, I mean, you'll ultimately grow out of those rates. You'll get into unions and grow out of those rates. But I'm happy that you're actually working. I'm happy that you're in a respectful environment. It sounds like both of you. So, but it's going to involve, obviously, it's not across the board that way, as Allison can attest to because she works with many different companies. It's not across the board the same kind of respect, rates, conditions. All of these things factor into our work experience. So my advice for anyone in working in this platform as is the same for any other platform. I've seen students in different regions of the world who found out because they started talking to each other that rates are wildly different. You got to sort of get together regionally. Everyone in Atlanta's got to say, okay, we will not work below this rate and really stick to it. And then you'll find things will start improving. I mean, we do it on the union level. It's even more important on a non-union level because we already have minimum terms and conditions on a union level, right? And I know it's really hard in LA because you guys have a huge marketplace, but it is so important in the long run for everyone.
I don't really talk right with people, and now I'm kind of encouraged more to. I'd like to. I think people don't know to negotiate on these things. I mean, I was just offered 250 for one, and I've worked with this company before. And I was like, well, in the past, this is what you've paid me. So yeah, and then they said yes. So I hope people know they can ask.
That's a great point. A lot of times we just don't even, we just take what's given. It's so true. I did that for so many years. What I'm noticing also in today's talk is that it's so much like the commercial world. It's so much like my experience of the commercial world. I feel like these parent companies actually have budgets and have money. You know what I mean? It's not like, maybe it's not studio money, but it is a miniature version of it.
Oh, I think maybe Zozo had said that she just recently did this, but we did one recently where it was literally sponsored by a vacuum company that was, and we had to put this vacuum in the short, and we filmed a commercial alongside of the actual feature for this vacuum. So yes, it's very, very commercial based. I keep coming back to that and like, what is going to look best in the trailer? Like, what is the trailer moment for this, you know?
This is preparing you guys so well if you do want TV directing careers, especially because we move so fast. Like literally, I was on a show yesterday, 79 setups, and you know, that's what Carissa, who couldn't be here because she's on a vertical, said is their normal day on, and it's sort of what you guys are saying too. Yeah,
There's
go
a
ahead.
question from Victoria. With shooting fewer takes, are other departments on it with their continuity? Which is a very good question because for me, it really depends. I've worked with incredible like prop masters and hair and makeup and on-set costumers that were super on top of it. I've also worked with people who were not very great at it, and I had to be very on top of costumes. Like every single scene, I had to double check, like, are they wearing the right thing? Are we on the right day? Because it was very unreliable. And so it kind of depends from person to person. But it is very important because, again, like you have very little takes. If they're wearing the wrong thing in the first take, you don't really have like 15 minutes to go change them. Like whatever's done is done. We're like, yep, we just gotta roll with it. So you have to spot the mistake before they get in front of camera. Like the moment you see talent walk on set, you're like, are they wearing the right thing? If they're not, you just gotta roll with it, honestly.
It honestly sounds like a great training ground, even just as script supervisors, just in getting super fast. Sarah, were you going to say something?
No, well, yes, I was gonna say we've come to a point even on our set where like the actors will almost come over and be like to me, like, "Am I good? We're good. Okay, keep going." Like they kind of know at this point that I always double check all of that for the same reason because we work with a great costume team, but they're also moving at the speed of light and mistakes have happened. And I always say, we're kind of the last line of defense, and they're really gracious about me double checking everything. They want me to do that. Nobody's ever gotten, I think, their feelings hurt because at the end of the day, I can go, hey, guys, this is the wrong outfit. And it happens just because of the speed that everybody's moving. So,
Oh, someone said, do you take photos of hair, makeup, and sets? Of course, right? Yes, you
I
do.
do. I have my screenshots that I take anyway, and I just at the end of every scene put them into a folder with the scene number on them. And that way I can quickly just go to my breakdown, see what I've seen in that day, what came right before, just kind of look at the photos that I have, and quickly move on from there. So.
Yeah, on the verticals, I don't take as much as I would on a slower pace narrative, just because there's not much time. Sometimes I'm just stuck in a chair, typing up all the notes from the previous scene, and boom, we're shooting the next one. So there's barely any time to like get up and take photos. So I work closely with like wardrobe and hair and makeup to be like, hey, if you're taking your own photos, like stay on top of that because sometimes I might need that if I don't catch it. So it kind of just depends on the pacing of the shoot.
I also have a question actually
Yeah.
for Zozo. Because the other thing that I found, which is so frustrating on our monitors, there's no time code. I can't tell whether or not we're rolling.
Oh,
I can't even, I had to kind of a little bit rejigger how they did things to make sure we always knew what was A cam and what was B cam because there's no information on the monitors.
Can
So
that be changed? Like that seems like that's metadata that's like in a digital camera that can
they
easily
don't want to
be.
put it up because it covers so much of their frame on camera. and they can't see
That
what.
makes no sense. You can have it on like black bars. Like, I don't know. There's gotta be a
I
way
may
to
have to
do
talk to
it.
them again, but it was a very like
Yeah.
we can't see anything if we've got any of that
Yeah.
data up.
Have
So,
post talk to them. It sounds like you're
Yeah.
sharing a monitor with the client. On the client's monitors, they don't need that information, but the director script supervisor definitely needs that.
if
That's
One mod,
very
one mod.
interesting. That's very interesting
Yeah.
because like yeah, like the one that I did for Pocket, we had well, we were shooting 16 by 9, so then we had like black bars kind of on top and bottom. It held the traditional time code and everything and the clip numbers. But on the vertical that I was, yes, it was an overlay on the camera, and they would sometimes turn it off because in like they wanted to see them, and I would always ask them to turn it back on because I need to see. Like I don't, like it's I don't care if there's too much overlay. Like I would rather be able to tell if we're rolling or not, or like the time code. And so yeah, that's
yeah,
that's so tricky. I would not be. I would definitely ask camera department to like do something about that. I'm sure there's something they can
yeah,
do.
maybe I'll have to broach that again. It was a pretty hard no, I feel like the first days
Damn.
I talked to them about that because their little screens are so small too, I guess what they're looking through. I'm gonna ask
Yeah.
again because it sounds like
Yeah.
else we can, but because of that, I feel like I've gotten very good at communicating with my camera team about like you
Mm-hmm.
have to let us know when you're rolling. Like they're constantly telling me like what clip, not clip, but what roll they're on. But my notes to the editor have changed so drastically because there's no way for me to say like at this moment is when you're going to find this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's
So that's
crazy.
been
And
a
there's
real challenge.
wow. Huh.
Mhm.
That's very interesting.
There are some writers in the audience, and we really, I mean, I know we didn't really cover stuff for the writers specifically. I mean, for me, it's more of an existential, it's not even an existential question, it's a practical question. How have the writers been getting hired? Is it the production company or the client that hires the writers? Do you guys know?
I have no idea. I have no idea where the writers are coming from. Um, I honestly have no clue.
They're
The
never on
writers are
set?
never the same. They're never the same. They're always different. I honestly don't know. I know that for the Pocket FM thing, it was one writer, and I think he was like contracted by Pocket FM, so he's not like an in-house writer for them or anything, and he's not part of the production either. We consider more him as a client than anything. He came on set a few times, and when he came on set, I was like, never format your script like this ever again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. But then Stephanie asked if so each scene or every second or third scene has a cliffhanger. Is that manufactured in post? So it is written into the script. The episodes are written into the script, and like the cliffhangery moments are in the script. Some of them are more cliffhangery than others, but when we're shooting, we never shoot the episodes. We always shoot by scenes, and I think that's where the confusion was.
Do you find directors, because in television, sometimes directors, if you nudge them and go, remember, this is an act end, they'll zoom in or they'll do something act endy. Do you find they're doing that on the cliffhangers?
Yeah, they usually tell the actors be like, okay, now give it like 2 seconds or like have a little hold a beat before the next line of dialogue or something like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Something I think that is also really different about vertical is there's a ton of voiceover moments. I don't know if yeah, this is something that we should touch on. There's a ton of VO where subtext is pretty much being spoken through VO over just like a look. So when we're filming, we always have to make sure to hold for that. So I find that I'm often reading VO for people, and then making sure that we get that at the end of a scene. But there's lots of moments where it's just like making sure that they're holding on a moment or holding on a look while their VO is being covered.
Do you always read the VO? Because in my case, I always ask the first AD to read the VO because once I'm
I
reading VO,
always,
I cannot do anything else.
It's
oh, I always,
you like to read it, right?
I love it. I love it.
I love reading VO. I love reading phone conversations. That's
Yeah.
my favorite thing because then I'm actually like acting against somebody instead of reading very cringy inner thoughts. But I usually ask the first AD to do it because after a few times, like even though it's fun, like it gets in the way of so many other things that I need to do.
It depends a little bit. When I was working with the first that I usually work with, she typically will do it, but we have gotten into quite a rhythm. And sometimes I'll see that she's in the middle of something and I'll just jump in and read it, or we kind of split it, I guess you could say, depending on like where villages and stuff as well. But on this last one, we had a newer first, and I read all of the VO.
If this were here to stay, we don't know if it's here to stay. It feels like it's pretty entrenched in that there's a viewership for it. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep filming these. If it's here to stay, what's a positive way forward? What's your best advice to recommend to producers making these kinds of shorts, or would you like to see anything change?
Yeah, a few positive things. First of all, I think it's wonderful that, it's kind of bringing jobs to the US because they need to have native English speaking people. And so it's, you have your American crew working on it. So I realized that this has blown up and it's created a lot of jobs in LA, in my experience. And in terms of my own craft and what I think a lot of other script supervisors working on verticals are going to realize that it's going to really, really train your skill. Like you're going to hone the hell out of your skill because you have to be so on top of it. And anything from like going to anything from doing a vertical is going to be such a breeze. Like my whole process has been so streamlined. So I think that's like a huge positive thing to take away. Yeah.
So you think they're here to stay and you'd keep going as is? Is there anything you'd change about it?
I think they're here to stay. The only thing I change about it is some more prep would be nice and just having them understand how important it is and obviously like have the rates reflect a bit more of how professional we are and how much work it takes for us to do the job and how important, like I feel like we've briefly touched on this, like our role seems to be even more important on verticals than it is on other sets. So I feel like the rate should reflect that as well.
Well, I think it's been, it's nice that it's steady work in a slower time, obviously. It's a good opportunity for people who will take the entry level. Like I know many of us are asking for a bit higher pay, but there are those who just can't do it. So it is a good opportunity for people who do entry level work. And hopefully these people will all move on to bigger budgets and they'll take us with them. It's really good for developing your onset skills because everything is a judgment call about how important is that. And working with people who maybe don't have as much experience as you do and doing that, in a pleasant manner where we all move forward. So it's great for developing those skills. I would love for people to be aware that I do need pre-production pay and I'm often not offered that. And pre-production work is very important for the intimacy coordinator. Obviously we hope the rates get higher. For me, I would love to get more notice. I just really hope, just in general, we get away from this 12-hour day. Mm. It's not a way to live your life. But I'm grateful for the work.
Yeah, I did a movie in Europe this year and it was 6 to 10 hours a day. And I was so happy. I've never been happier, I think. And I thought, why haven't we, how come we can make great movies in 6 to 10 hours with American producers in Europe, but not in North America? It's interesting.
I do think that this is here to stay, at least for a while. I mean, we've seen it blow up so much. I think we started at like 3 of these production companies doing verticals here. I think we're closer to 8 within even just the last 6 months that I've been working it. I think we're going to see a whole lot more of this. My hope is that storylines do get a little bit better as people get a little bit bored of the same tropes over and over. Because I think we are all artists, even if we're data organizers to a certain extent. And eventually I think story for me is going to matter. Like I want to be able to put out stuff that I'm not just necessarily like having a good chuckle over. It's really fun. I really highly recommend if you watch any of the verticals, do like a good backyard party with all of your friends. And I swear you'll have a really, really good time. But I would love for the stories to get a little bit better. We've already touched on pay. But I do also think, depending on how you do want to live your life, a lot of these companies, especially the one I know I'm working with, is trying to do a better job about making it something that's closer to a 10-hour day, making sure you know when your time off is going to be, that you have longevity. I mean, they gave us a schedule for like the, next couple of months, and they're keeping crew on it, which is really lovely. So I think as long as rates kind of continue to improve, I think that's a really big benefit to quality of life so that you can plan ahead a little bit and not constantly be working and worrying about what your next job is going to be. And I really enjoy that, I have to say. So.
Thank you guys so much. I have learned so much today. And I thank you so much, Zozo, Sarah, and Allison. Reach out to me with emails if you have more questions. Zozo, Sarah, and Allison are all Director Whispers in my Director Whisper training program. And so I'm sure I can ask them and relay the the answer.
Yeah. You can also like find me directly on Facebook or
Oh
Instagram as
yeah, very
well.
cool. When I post the video on YouTube, I'll post your social media handles so people can find you. That's a great idea. Yeah, if you're interested in training as a script supervisor, come talk to me about the Director Whisperer training program. I just am launching a new higher level coaching program for experienced script supervisors next week. I am so excited about that. And there's always stuff going on in our community. So even if you don't want to do the training, join my mailing list. We've always got events. Thank you guys so much. Rock your career. That's what I wanted to say.